You're now watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Davenport Auto Park, the ride of your life. And also sponsored by Flores Glass, serving the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
Friends, and welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcock. So glad you could be with us tonight. I think we've got a really interesting show tonight. We've got some information that I've compiled from talking with some of our viewers. I want to extend a special thanks, in fact, to Wallace Abernathy. Wallace and I have exchanged a few emails. He sent me some pictures. Gave me a really interesting history lesson. I'll share with you a little bit later in the show tonight. We'll talk a little bit about the path of General Cornwallis, the British general who came right through this area back in the late 1700s after the Revolutionary War. I mentioned last week that Joe Bell had given me an idea for a topic for a show, and so I did some research, got a few things to share with you tonight about the Westries community out between Rocky Mountain, Nashville, and Sunset Avenue, or Old 64. You don't want to miss that. Steve Looper, if you remember last week, we shared some pictures and talked a little bit about the Davenport grist mill. My friend Steve Looper has bought the property down there and has been busy to be working down there and clearing land off and really making it. It's got a nice area down there anyway, right on the river. But he sent a picture today, sent me a picture that one of the neighbors across the road from the mill had shown him, and so we'll share that with you too. And as always, I want to thank everybody who calls in and shares your memories with us and your ideas. I appreciate those that keep me straight each week. Eric and Harold and some of the ones who call in and keep me on my toes and keep me honest, as the old saying goes. I appreciate all of you. We do have a lot of ground to cover tonight. Before we get into the pictures and the articles and so forth I want to share with you, I ran across an article from the Rocky Mount Telegram. Many of you may remember there was a column that appeared in the Telegram for many, many years called An Old Reporter. And it was a reporter, and his name escapes me at the moment. I have seen his name, but I can't remember it right now. But periodically he would write a column where he would go back and look at newspaper articles from 50, 75, 100 years earlier and just basically re-report those stories. And so I came across this article, and it talks about several things, but and it's a long article. I'm not going to try to read the whole thing, but it's one small section that really caught my eye because it talks about a cemetery off Falls Road in the area I used to live in. And as far back as certainly for the last 60 plus years, it's been a residential section. And I'm certain, in fact, for probably well over 100 years, it's been a residential section. But at one time, it was a cemetery. And so I'm going to read this to you. It was actually referred to as the Ricks Graveyard. It says, one of the oldest sites of historic interest in the city of Rocky Mount is the old Ricks Graveyard, which occupies a good portion of the block formed by Ridge, Oak, and Columbia Streets. Today it's Columbia Avenue, of course. It is situated on a knoll overlooking the river lowgrounds and is surrounded by old trees and evidently marks one of the early home sites in this section. There are several gravestones here marking the graves of members of the Ricks family. Some of the stones have recently been pulled up and turned over. Isaac Ricks received a grant for much of the land on the site of the northwestern part of Rocky Mount in 1732. He was one of the very early settlers and died about 1762. His son, James Ricks, increased his father's land holdings and operated a grist mill at the falls. He died about 1795. Also buried in the Ricks graveyard is Etheldred, I can't pronounce his name, looks like Etheldred Gray, born 1793, died 1846, another early citizen of Rocky Mount. His widow, Mrs. Martha Gray, ran the Gray Hotel for many years, which stood on the southeast corner of Thomas and Washington Streets. This was one of the earliest hotels in Rocky Mount, about 1873. It was rented by Colonel Gray W. Hammond until the Hammond House was built. In 1892, the Gray Hotel was owned and occupied by the Bullock family. Ethelred Gray had 6 daughters, of whom Virginia married William C. Woodward, Helen married J.H. Chapman. Anyway, the neat thing about this cemetery, I used to live on Columbia Avenue as a small child. We lived on the block closest down to, in the direction of the mill. If you turn off at Ridge Street and turn left, go all the way to the end down there. We lived on 2 different houses, in fact, side by side, moved out of one to the other one. But I'm familiar with that area, and I never knew there was a cemetery. But the cemetery was basically, apparently, according to this article, better part of a block, and all that's houses now. You know, it's the block that was, as I said, covered by, oh shoot, I just had it on the tip of my tongue, Columbia Avenue, Ridge Street, Oak Street. One block further north of that, of course, I think it's Bellevue. But anyway, there was a cemetery there, and you know, the Ricks family name is certainly well known in Rocky Mount. Robert Henry Ricks being very instrumental in the Ricks Tobacco Company, the Ricks Hotel, several banks, Rocky Mount Mills. So the Ricks family is deeply embedded in Rocky Mount's history. But this graveyard, I never knew anything about. If you remember in past shows, we've talked about a cemetery that was supposedly up somewhere close to the mill at the end of Elm Street down there, on East Elm, I should say. The rumor has it that there were some slaves buried there that were active in building the mill when it was first built. I have gone looking, trying to find that cemetery, and could find no part of it. But I never knew anything about this particular Ricks graveyard. And now, of course, there are houses all along there. That entire block is houses, and has been that way for many, many years. But I just thought it was a neat piece of history that I never knew anything about until I stumbled across this article here. The Ricks graveyard over off Columbia Avenue, Rick Street, Oak Street, and that area over there. Okay, I wanted to revisit a couple of pictures from last week. Because after last week's show, I realized that some of these we had actually covered before on prior shows, and I had forgotten it. And some of these buildings that we showed you that date back to the early 1900s, 1907, 1910, and so forth. A couple of them are still in existence, in fact. So, Lee, without further ado, let's jump right into this. Item number 1, you remember this picture we showed last week? It was referred to as the Phillips Building. This picture was actually made somewhere around 1907. The building was owned by Mr. Hyman Phillips of Tarboro. As Eric pointed out last week, the name Phillips is spelled with 1 L instead of 2, which is very unusual. But anyway, this was the building, and you see at the top there in Roman numerals, it's got 1907, the year it was built. So this picture was taken sometime after that, obviously. But anyway, this was the Phillips Building in 1907. Item number 2, if you would, Lee, the second picture. This is the building today. It still stands at 128 Northwest Main Street. That's on the Nash County side of Main Street, of course. You can see there right beside it, Spate's Trophy Shop. But this is the building today, and it looks identical as it did literally over 100 years ago. And we've seen this picture before. I've shown this picture. It was in my collection of pictures. And when I was going back, I said, wait a minute, I've seen that. And sure enough, this is it. It's still standing today. Item number 3, if you would, Lee. We talked last week about the Rocky Mount Hosiery Company. And I won't go back and read this entire article, but certainly it was a very important part of early Rocky Mount business district. It employed a lot of people, some 200 employees at one time. It had the capacity to make over 800 dozen pair of hose and gloves and so forth a day. But anyway, this is the Rocky Mount Hosiery Company building as it was. You see there, it was built in 1905. But this building still stands today too. Item number 4, Lee, is the Rocky Mount Hosiery building today. Now, some of you may remember, the Belt Titles Honda used to be. This is on Franklin Street there, just before you get to where you see the railroad track in the foreground. But if you're headed south on Franklin Street, on your right-hand side there, it's where this building is. And the Belt Tyler Honda shop was in there for a while. Some of you may remember Bobby Owens was a sheetrock man for many years in Rocky Mount. Bobby rented a space in this building and operated out it for many years. But I'd forgotten that this building was still standing. It's in horrible shape. I rode by here not too long ago, in fact, and it's literally about to fall in. But for a building that is literally 117, almost 118 years old, the fact that it's still standing is remarkable in itself, and it's such a shame that we can't do something with these old buildings to salvage them. It's probably too far gone now. It's probably going to fall in on itself, frankly. But the building as of today is still standing down on South Franklin Street down there before you get to Church Street. Okay, Lee, let's go to item number 4 if we could. Another building that we looked at last week, pictures I should say, was these 2 old school buildings. There on your left is the East graded school. There on the right is the West graded school. And I mistakenly said last week, at least I think I did, I mistakenly stated that the East School was in the location where the Fannie Gorham School and later the Rocky Mount Judicial Center is, and that was incorrect. If that's what I did indeed say, that was incorrect. Eric helped me remember, and that we had talked about this before in a previous show. The East School building was actually kind of in the same block and around the corner from the R.M. Wilson Junior High School, which of course at one time was the Rocky Mount High School, and it actually faced what is currently Discovery Street. Many years ago, that street was referred to as Raleigh Street. And if you remember here a couple of months back, we did a show about a house a little bit further south on Discovery Street that belonged to a Mr. Horn, very influential businessman in Rocky Mount. And that house too is literally about to fall in. But anyway, the East graded school was faced at Discovery Street in the same block as R.M. Wilson Junior High. And of course, the West graded school was in the location where it's currently occupied by present day James Craig Brazel Elementary School. This building burned down and it was replaced with the J.C. Brazel Elementary School, which still stands today. So both of these buildings, of course, are long gone now. But I just want to clarify that because I think I did state that the East School was the location for the Rocky Mount Judicial Center, and of course that was incorrect. So, okay. Lee, if we could then, let's go to that was number 5. Let's go to item number 6. And I actually shared this. Those that follow me on Facebook remember seeing this already. I mentioned last week about the book that I found out about that I was loaned by Miles Glasgow over in Nashville, and I later found the online version of this book. And in 1906, 1907, along in that time frame, there was a gentleman, Mr. J.R. Sorsby, who had a hardware store down on Main Street, 112 South Main Street. It was actually in a couple different locations. But at one point, he was at 112 Southwest Main Street, and this was a shot of the interior of his hardware store as it was in that time frame. Item number 7, if you would, Lee, that building still stands today also, and it is, you see right there, it's the building that the most recent thing that I could find that was in there was that Charms Beauty and Beauty Supply House. But that building, you see the tall, dark, kind of a reddish color building there, was the location for Sorsby's hardware store in the early 1900s. And again, this is another building that's well over 100 years old, and it's still standing today. I think at the moment it's not occupied. And I want to say someone is trying to remodel or rehab it or something. Don't quote me on that. I'm not positive about that. But I was down that way, downtown Rocky Mount, not too terribly long ago. And I think I saw evidence of somebody doing some work in this building. So maybe someone's trying to save it. I sure hope so anyway. At the top of the show, I mentioned that I had received a picture today via text message from Steve Looper. Steve sent me a text of a picture that the gentleman who called into the show, I think last week we were talking about the Davenport grist mill. The gentleman, we got a call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Randy, good evening. Nice to see your show tonight.
Thank you. Good to have you. Good to be with you.
The alley behind that picture you're showing where Sorsby's hardware, it's Sorsby's alley.
It is, and I did not know that until I saw that on Facebook. Somebody else, there's a woman who's got a store, one of those stores along there, and she made the comment on Facebook that it was called Sorsby Alley. I never knew that. Never knew that alley had a name.
Just that one little section, and also Sorsby. I don't know if this is the same Sorsby, but there was a Sorsby that was an early mayor of Rocky Mount. It had some sort of story behind that character. I'm not quite familiar with it all, but he was only mayor for a brief period of time. he got sworn in and then very quickly resigned.
I seem to recall reading something about that, and I think it was the same gentleman right here, this J.R. Sorby. I think he was the man you're talking about. And I don't remember the details. You're right. I think it was a short time that he served as mayor, but I believe it was the same man.
Be a topic for another day.
There you go. Okay, Bob. Good to hear from you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Okay. All right. I've said before, it's a shame that these old buildings downtown Rocky Mount can't be salvaged and rehabbed and, refurbished and helped someone get started doing something down there. And there is an effort underway. I want to point out that there are some people down there working and trying to do something with some of these old buildings, and I applaud that effort. I do. I hope they're successful in what they're attempting. And I'd like to see many more of these old buildings be saved and refurbished and open back up for business. There's a lot of history in Rocky Mount. We said that many times on this show, and I'd love to see more of these buildings be brought back, if not to the condition they were when they were in operation many, many years ago. But I'd love to see some connection or some tie-in to a previous. The Lorena Coffee Shop, I think, has done a wonderful job down there. Just rehabbing the old bank building, the First National Bank building down there. Jesse Gerstle has taken that building and done remarkable work. I've not seen the whole thing, but what I have seen looks really nice. And I understand he's got some other projects going on down there too. So I'm just optimistic, cautiously so, but optimistic that we're going to see some good things happening downtown Rocky Mount. If not right away, hopefully in the future. That's my sincere hope anyway. Okay, Lee, let's go then to, that was item number 7. Let's go to item number 8. And I mentioned that Steve Luber had sent me a picture. This is probably, I don't know for certain, but I'm guessing this is probably the last picture that was taken of what was left of the Davenport grist mill on Tar River upstream from Layman's Ferry Bridge. As I said before, Steve has recently purchased his property. The building you see there has long gone. Steve said the rumor mill has it that the building burned up one board at a time. People would go down there and rip a board off the wall and throw it in the bonfire to keep warm down on the river while they were fishing or hanging out, partying, whatever they were doing down there. And so the building, the rumor has it the building got disassembled and burned up one board at a time. So anyway, but it's a neat old picture. We think it's from the probably early mid-1960s. Best guess is that the mill ceased to be operational sometime in the late 1950s, 58, 59. But the view you're seeing here is taken from across the river. The dam is there to your left, and over behind the building structure you see here and through the woods, of course, would be Halifax Road. So, and the irony here is that whoever's taking this picture is standing on the very low side of the river. If you go down here and look and see this, the side of the river bank where the mill actually was is much higher than the side of the river where this picture was taken from. So someone was literally almost at the water level taking this picture, because that side of the river is really got a really shallow bank there. But anyway, it's a neat old picture. We're not sure exactly when it was taken. Like I said, we're guessing early mid-1960s. But it's probably the last picture that was taken of this structure before it was completely disassembled and burned up or fell in or whatever happened to it. I do have a request in to the Wilson Library. I've made contact with those folks up there. They've been very gracious in helping to find pictures of old Rocky Mount. We're going to share some of those with you later on the show tonight. But I have inquired whether or not there are any pictures that Charlie Killebrew may have taken of the grist mill. Charlie was certainly here during the time the mill was operational in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And so, and if you haven't figured out already, I've got a thing for grist mills. We're going to talk some more about grist mills very shortly here. I found out about another one literally a day or two ago that I never knew anything about, and it's right down the road, or at least I should say it was. It was right down the road from my house. And At last count, if I'm not mistaken, I have now identified 4 different grist mills on Stony Creek alone, going back to the early mid 1700s. And so every time I hear about a new grist mill, I get excited about it. But I tell you what, Lee, let's go ahead and jump to item number 9 before we take our next break, or first break for the night. It's hard to see this, I understand. I should remember this, but honestly, I can't say that I do. It's 1977, and what you're looking at here is a new bridge being constructed over Stony Creek down at the intersection of Hunter Hill Road and Halifax Road. That is literally right down the road from my house. I live on Halifax Road, and I go by this bridge all the time, several times a week, and so I'm very familiar with the area. But what I did not know was that just a little bit upstream from this location right here was a grist mill, and it was run by a man named Mr. Thomas Hunter, and that's where the name Hunter Hill came from, Hunter Hill Road. I'm going to read this caption real quick. This is a very short caption. It says, new bridge being constructed. Construction is nearly complete on a new bridge that crosses Stony Creek near the intersection with Hunter Hill Road in rural Nash County. By the way, this was in 1977. This picture was taken here. The road is State Road 1455 and is known as the Old Halifax Road. The road traces the route of General Cornwallis and marched through North Carolina in May of 1781 during the Revolutionary War. According to T.E. Ricks, president of the Nash County Historical Association, this is the 3rd bridge to be constructed at the site. Named last year as Hunter's Bridge, the location honors a Nash County man who headed the county commissioners during the Revolutionary War and had a home and a grist mill near the site of the bridge. So 2 things I learned here, or 3 things actually, that there had been 3 bridges here. I didn't know that. Secondly, there was a grist mill literally just right upstream a short ways from this location on Stony Creek. And thirdly, I always wondered how Hunter Hill Road got its name, and now I know. Mr. Thomas Hunter lived in this area and had a grist mill on Stony Creek, and that's how Hunter Hill Road got its name. Okay, Lee, bring it back to me. Let's take a commercial break, folks. Got some more to talk about, a few more notes to share with you about grist mills in general. We're going to take a look at some more pictures. We're going to talk a little bit about the Westry community out between Rocky Mount and Nashville. So don't go anywhere. We've got much more to share with you. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
We're in our 18th year of practice at the Hammer Chiropractic Center, and we've seen over 15,000 different people in the Rocky Mount area. 40% of headaches actually come from a neck problem. Many patients come in taking multiple aspirin, over-the-counter medications and such a day, and we can get you to stop doing that and actually fix the problem so the headaches don't rise anymore. A lot of people think chiropractic hurts. It does not. Most of the people come in and they feel great when they leave.
And we're back. You know, before the break, we talked a little bit about the Hunter's Mill. Thomas Hunter had a grist mill on Stony Creek, just a little bit up from the bridge there, going over Stony Creek there at the intersection of Hunter Hill Road and Halifax Road. And so, as I said, I know the area. I have fished and swam and canoed and floated on inner tubes up and down most of Stony Creek, but I did not know that there was ever a grist mill anywhere in that part of Stony Creek. So now I've got a mission to go try to find any remnants or any leftover parts of that mill. I feel like there's got to be something down there to give evidence that there was a grist mill there. But I found this article that appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram in 1960, and it was another segment from an old reporter's column. Somewhere I've got the name of that guy who did that. But anyway, this article appeared October 1960. And again, it was a reporting by this reporter from records from or article, I should say, from a much earlier edition of the Telegram. So Lee, item number 10, if you would put on the screen for our viewers, and it's very short. I'm just going to read it real quickly here for you. But it says, on November the 23rd, 1772, Joseph I. Strickling of Edgecombe County. By the way, at this point, there was no Nash County. Nash County came into being, I think, 1777. So all this area was Edgecombe County at that time. But in 1772, Joseph Strickling of Edgecombe County sold Thomas Hunter for 2.10 pounds proclamation money 1 acre south of Stony Creek and joining the said Thomas Hunter's mill. And you see the witnesses there, James Thomas, James Daniel, Shadrach Rudlin, and John Davenport. Now, this was in 1772. The mill was already in operation. So the big question now is, when did this mill get built? When was it operational? When did it start? I don't know. I'm going to do some research, see what I can find out. But at least in 1772, it's over 200 years ago, this mill, 250 years, I guess now, this mill was operating on Stony Creek, just off of Hunter Hill Road and Halifax Road, I should say. And to me, it's just fascinating that there were so many grist mills operating in the area. And they all apparently were, at least to some degree, successful and profitable. But it was apparently pretty commonplace in the early to mid 1700s for grist mills to pop up literally on almost any running piece of water. And so it's just, to me, the technology to build a grist mill and use the flow of the water to power the mill, it says a lot about ingenuity. Number one, it says a lot about the entrepreneurship of these individuals who, with little guarantee of success, and certainly the odds stacked against them, that they would venture out and build these mills on these creeks that were subject to being flooded. Certainly, they were subject to being damaged, certainly by any number of things. Fire was a common cause for these mills to get damaged. But they operated for many, many years, and some of them, I understand there are some mills around that are still operating. That's on my bucket list, is to go to an operating grist mill and see one operate sometime soon, I hope. Okay, I found this article. I mentioned earlier about Cornwallis traveling down Halifax Road, and I found this neat article on a website called The American Revolution Tour of North Carolina. And I'm just going to read this to you real quick. It's subtitled Hunter's Mill, an Army Camp and a Tory Mistake. It says, in May 1781, the British Army of Lieutenant General Lord Charles Cornwallis was making its way to Virginia from Wilmington, where it went to recover after the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. It was following the Halifax Road, as it is still known today, though he diverted off it the day before to camp at a plantation in modern Rocky Mount. Slowed by fording the Tar River on Wednesday, May 9th, they only made it this far that day. They set up camp near Hunter's Mill on Stony Creek. Armies generally marched from grain mill to grain mill, not only for the grain, but because there was usually fresh water sources. There is a wide shoulder at the coordinates on the east side of Halifax Road, just south of Stony Creek. across it and downhill from Cornwallis Drive. By the way, another point here, if you leave, say, Dorchester, and you're headed south on Halifax Road, as you cross over the bridge over Stony Creek, the very next road you come to the right is Cornwallis Drive. And of course, it's named after Cornwallis because he and his troops camped in that area in 1781. Along with an increasing entourage of escaping slaves and loyalist Tory, in parentheses, Toryist refugees, around 1,600 soldiers and their camp followers spread along the creek bank. Though records do not specify this, they likely did so on this side, both because it's flatter and because any organized patriot attacks would have come from the north. Their camp stretched as much as 2 miles along the stream. Hunter's Mill was used as a commissary for the officers to grind grain for all. Somewhere along this creek, a Tory's plans turned out badly, according to one source. Robert Beard, a patriot militia deserter, arranged with Cornwallis to become a captain of a loyalist militia, part-time soldier, and earn a bounty for each patriot captured. However, his first outing, a home invasion of James Drake in this vicinity, went awry. 2 patriots escaped while Mrs. Drake plied the Tory invaders with food and brandy. This enticed Beard to dally around too long. The escapees had time to return with the Drake's son Britain, that is Captain Britain Drake, with 70 of his horseback militia. Beard was captured, later tried, and executed. So a deserter from our side joined forces, at least temporarily, to wreak havoc in the area, and on behalf of Cornwallis, and he didn't fare well. He ended up being executed for his part in this plan. The article you see on your screen there now is another article that I found from November of 1970, and it tells a little bit more about this. It said, L.S. Ensko, historian of Nash County, discussed Cornwallis's march through Nash County to members of the Nash County Historical Association meeting here Thursday night in the director's room of People's Bank and Trust. Ensko told those in attendance that Cornwallis left Charleston, South Carolina, headed to Petersburg, Virginia on April 17, 1777. He said Cornwallis came to Nash County and first camped with 1,500 men and 4 cannons at the present location of the Rocky Mount Wilson Airport. At that time, the site was known as the Crowell Plantation. Cornwallis then crossed the Tar River at Lehman's Ferry and went to Hunter's Mill, on which is now Hunter Hill Road. He then went to Swift Creek at Gold Rock and camped for the night. The next day, he left for Halifax, where he spent several days and then went on toward Petersburg, Virginia. So Cornwallis, I should add too, he'd taken a pretty good licking at his last battle before he made his jaunt up through this part of present-day Nash County. As I said, back then it was still, no, I take that back. In 1777, I'm not sure of the date, but I think I recall reading that 1777 was the year that Nash County was cut out of Edgecombe County and created, I should say, from Edgecombe County. So I'm not, but anyway, the point being that Cornwallis was basically had taken a beating in his last battle and was headed back, trying to get back to some semblance of peace and rest and relaxation. Another interesting tidbit about his march through this area, when he and his troops settled there on Stony Creek at the Hunter's Grist Mill, there's a neat story that Wallace Abernathy shared with me too, about something referred to as Cornwallis's horse trough. Lee, if you would put up item number 12, and this was something that Wallace sent me. I'm not exactly sure of the source of this, but I'll read it to you here. It says, one of the first items of historical interest I heard after I began teaching in Red Oak Farm Life High School in 1915 related to the march of Lord Cornwallis and his British Army across Nash County. One of my pupils told me there was a rock on Stony Creek near her home that had a nice round bowl-shaped hole in it called Cornwallis Horse Trough, because Lord Cornwallis, commander of the British Army, fed his horse from it during the Revolutionary War. I have picked up the story from many other sources. Recently, Charlie Rose showed me the Cornwallis Horse Trough on Stony Creek. Another story I picked up from several sources was that Cornwallis camped out under the oak tree, or under an oak tree on the south side of Tar River near Layman's Ferry, and the tree was pointed out to me. Now, I'm not sure when this article was written, but he goes on to say, it was a very old white oak tree 50 years ago. When I saw it 25 years later, the tree had almost completely rotted away. I'm told it is now gone. So whatever tree this was, and wherever it was, it was obviously in the vicinity of the Layman's Ferry Bridge down there over Tar River, it's long gone. But I understand this stone is still there. And so my next thing on my bucket list is to find Cornwallis's horse trough stone and take some pictures from my own collection. But it's just a neat story there. Now, whether we may never know whether Cornwallis had one of his soldiers take a hammer and a chisel and chisel out this bowl-shaped indention in this rock, or whether it was some kind of naturally formed indention. But the rumor is that that he used it to feed his horse. Cornwallis used it to feed his horse. So anyway, neat little tidbit of information there that you may or may not have ever heard before. Okay, I mentioned that Wallace sent me a bunch of pictures and a lot of neat history, and so as I was going through these, I was debating which ones to show and which ones to share with you. And so we've talked about old hotels around Rocky Mount many times on this show. Certainly we talked about the Cambridge Hotel and the Ricks Hotel. I mentioned earlier the Davenport Hotel. There was a Marriott Hotel. But there was a neat article here that appeared in 1951, another one of these old reporter columns. And I'm just going to read a bit of this to you here. It says, the announcement that the Cambridge Hotel will be taken down. We got a call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller. You on the air? Hello, caller. Are you there?
Yes, Randy. I see you mentioned Billy Deal in the article.
Yes, sir.
I knew Mr. Deal as a Boy Scout. He would come to our troop and give some talks about Indian artifacts and things of that nature in the Twin County area. And also I knew him as a City of Rocky Mount employee. He was a city surveyor.
Okay.
A member of the engineering department. So just want to pass that on so those that might remember Mr. Deal.
Yeah, I actually, I knew him already, but I had the acquaintance to do some computer work for another one of your old co-workers, Doug Robertson, from the City of Rocky Mountain. Saw Doug yesterday, and then again today. Had to go back. But anyway, well, that's interesting. I'm glad you shared that with us. Is Mr. Deal still living?
No.
He's not. Okay. Okay, Bob, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All righty. So, there was this old reporter did this column, and he was talking about the Cambridge Hotel, and he says the Cambridge was Rocky Mount's first brick hotel when it opened in 1905. It was the pride of the late Isaac Levy, its builder, and a group of associates in a stock company. The hotel business underwent some rapid changes in the 5-year period that followed. Mrs. M.O. Winstead closed the Woodard Hotel. The Hammond Hotel, under the management of a Mr. Griffin, was burned, and the Marriott Hotel was leased by Mr. T.L. Bland, who arrived on the scene around 1905. There was, however, a brief fling at the hotel business by the late Joe Cuthrell prior to the Bland House. It was around 1906 that Mr. Bland and the late R.H. Ricks associated themselves in the building of the Ricks Hotel on the site of the Cuthrell Marriott Hotel at the corner of Main and Hammond Streets. At the onset, it was possessed of 75 rooms and 40 baths. The Cambridge Hotel continued to claim its place in the hotel firmament as it was 3 stories and provided 42 rooms with a private bath, and the larger portion of them and a telephone in each room. Its early advertising pointed to the fact that it was constructed of stone and pressed brick. Both hotels boasted their fine dining and the American plan for a charge per day guest. So the point here is, from the late 1800s, 1880, 1890, somewhere along there, up through the early 1900s, Rocky Mount boasted several hotels, and certainly they were some of them anyway, were as fine as any hotels on the East Coast. The Cambridge and the Rick's Hotel certainly being two examples. Item number 13, if you would, Lee. This is a picture that Wallace sent me, and it's a little better picture of the Cambridge Hotel than some of the ones that I had. I've actually got a few pictures of it too. But this was taken somewhere around 1905, I think. And as you can see, it was indeed a grand hotel, all pressed brick, concrete, very, very luxurious for the early 1900s. And of course, like so many things downtown Rocky Mount, it's no longer with us. It's gone the way of the horse and buggy. Item number 14, Lee. This business operated in downtown Rocky Mount in the early 1900s. It was Gorham's Hotel, which was also a lunchroom, a store, and a hotel all in one. Very enterprising. Mr. Gorham built his hotel down in the area in very close proximity to the Cambridge Hotel and, of course, the Rick's Hotel. And I don't recall ever seeing this hotel before. This one was a new one on me. And I assume, I don't know this for fact, but I assume it was probably the same family that was involved with May and Gorham Drugstore. I'm fairly certain it was probably related somehow to Bobby Gorham, who, of course, in the 1960s built Terrytown Mall. But anyway, it was a store, a hotel, and a lunch restaurant, all in one building there. So, all right. Also around the 1900 time frame, we had the Hammond Motel. Lee, item number 15, if you would. And this is the Hammond picture, and this is not a great picture. It's kind of blurry. But the Hammond Hotel was just across the street from the passenger station, providing real service and a home for the traveling man between 1880 and the time when it was burned, about 1904. A three-story frame structure of something like 50 rooms with a commodious dining room and kitchen in the two-story part in the rear of the lobby, which was at the entrance. The hotel was the center of the transit life of the community, and the posts in the front of this hotel, in front of this picture, are the demarcation between the railroad passenger depot yard and South Main Street. So that tells you how close it was to the railroad tracks. It was right there at the tracks. It says the hotel was under the management of the Hammond family, and in their earlier days was the home of the late Charlie W. Hammond, leading Main Street grocer, and Mrs. Tom J. Hackney, grandmother of Mrs. Hyman Battle, and Mrs. A.W. Arrington, mother of Charles Arrington, proprietor of the Cameo Theater. How about that? The hotel was later managed by Mrs. W.B. Marriott, and then upon her building a hotel at the corner of South Main and Hammond Streets, the Hammond Hotel underwent several changes of management, including the late H.H. Griffin. At the time of its destruction in 1904, it was being run by Mrs. Grantham. So, you know, this was a wooden structure, obviously, not brick like the Cambridge, but certainly a very grand hotel in its own right. And again, Rocky Mount had some really neat old buildings down there and neat businesses. I see it's time for our next commercial break, so Lee, bring it back to me if you would. When we come back, we're going to show you a couple more old pictures of a couple old buildings around Rocky Mount. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the Westries community, Westries Crossroads. Many of you remember that. I didn't realize that Westries spread out as far as it actually did. It was quite a bit that was referred to as Westries. So when we come back from the break, we'll talk about that, some other things too. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
We're in our 18th year of practice at the Hammer Chiropractic Center, and we've seen over 15,000 different people in the Rocky Mount area. 40% of headaches actually come from a neck problem. Many patients come in taking multiple aspirin, over-the-counter medications and such a day, and we can get you to stop doing that and actually fix the problem so the headaches don't rise anymore. A lot of people think chiropractic hurts. It does not. Most of the people come in and they feel great when they leave.
Before the break, we were talking about some old hotels in downtown Rocky Mount, certainly the Cambridge and the Rick's Hotel, too, that we've talked about several times on the shows in the past. But there were others, obviously, the Hammond Hotel, the Woodward Hotel, and one that, we got a call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller, you on the air?
All right, that place you just showed, the Hammond Hotel, that Mr. George Hammond, who had that place, it was, he had a daughter named Josephine who married a man named T.J. Hackney, and they wound up as man and wife building that big house over there at the corner of Franklin Street and Sunset Avenue that later became, everybody called it the Battle House.
That's right.
Was built by T.J. Hackney.
That's right.
T.J. Hackney's wife was Josephine Hammond.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
That's right. Okay, buddy, thank you. Okay. Yeah, you know, the old saying is money begets money, and there was certainly some money between those two families, and obviously a grand home there. And, you know, we've talked about this before, that home was, I guess, in many ways destined to be demolished by the wishes of the family, and but it's such a shame that I remember that home. I never had the opportunity to go inside of it. I wish I had it, but I never did. But it was certainly a magnificent home from the outside anyway, and I assume on the inside as well. Okay, well, let's go to item number 16. We were talking about the Marriott Hotel too, and this is the only picture that I think I found of the Marriott Hotel. And it's an old, grainy, blurry picture, so I apologize for the quality. But this was, again, one of the many hotels that were up and down Main Street in the early 1900s. And, you know, Rocky Mount being the location midway between New York and Miami, we've talked about this before, and it was also in the crossroads between the western part of the state and the coast. So it was just a lot of traffic through Rocky Mount over the years. A lot of transit people would come in and stay a night, maybe two, and conduct some business and then get back on the train and head back out. And so I don't know that any of these folks got rich running a hotel, but I think it's safe to say that they all probably did pretty well with the amount of traffic that was in and out of Rocky Mount, particularly during the heyday, you know, when the Emerson shops were going strong down there, and there was so much work, you know, people coming in to work in the Rocky Mountain mills and in the Emerson shop railroad yards and working in the tobacco industry. There was just a lot going on. Speaking of the tobacco industry, I ran across a picture from 1945 that showed in one page of the Rocky Mount Telegram, it showed both of the Fenner warehouses, Fenner Warehouse number 1 and Fenner Warehouse number 2. So Lee, if you will, let's put up item number 17. And this was actually, both of these pictures I'm going to show you here are on the same page of the Telegram, but I intentionally cut them up and broke them in half. This was in August of 1945, opening day of tobacco. As we've talked about before, opening day at tobacco market downtown Rocky Mount was big time news. Farmers came in from the field with their tobacco to sell in the market here, and everybody benefited. The old saying, the rising tide lifts all boats, and certainly downtown merchants were very much willing and eager for the farmers to come into town and bring the tobacco to the market because all the stores made money. Farmers oftentimes would, spend a few days in town during the market season and sell tobacco and do shopping for the family and buy much needed household items and goods and replace things that were worn out. So it was a really busy time in downtown Rocky Mount. And this was Fenner's Warehouse number 1. This was actually at 324 Falls Road. And so it kind of, if I'm correct in my thinking here, this is in the general area there of where the old Hardee's was. They're behind the gas station. And then item number 18, Lee, if you would. This is a neat thank you and a welcome, if you will, from the man himself, Mr. Julian B. Fenner. And that's Julian B. Fenner there in the picture. And he's got a welcome to the market. He says, "Dear sir, Rocky Mount Tobacco Market is scheduled to open this season on Tuesday, August 21st, and I want to advise all of our friends that Fenner's Warehouses number 1 and number 2 will be open and ready to begin the season on that date. I want to take this opportunity to express to our friends and customers my deepest appreciation for their loyal friendship and liberal patronage during the past, and I ask for your continuation of same in the future." And the top picture, of course, is him. The bottom picture is not as good a picture as the first one, but that is the Fenner's Warehouse number 2, and it was located at the corner of Main Street and Gold Leaf Street. So very close to one another, but both those tobacco warehouses, I'm sure, were a hotbed of activity once the market opened on August 21st of 1945. Okay, I've got a call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller, you on the air?
All right, I was just calling to let you know the audio that's going on right now is in bad need of some attention.
Okay, I'm glad you told me. I was super to get Lee to take a look at that for us.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye. Yeah, Lee, I don't know what's going on with the audio, but if you could just take a look at things back there and see if there's anything we need to do. Okay, I mentioned that we had a request from a viewer to take a peek and take a look at, I should say, the Westry community. And, I confess my knowledge of the Westry community was somewhat limited. I remember Westry's Takeout. I've eaten many a cheeseburger there in my teenage years. And so I was familiar with the Westry's Takeout and that area being known as Westry's Crossroads. But beyond that, I must admit, I didn't know a whole lot about the area. And so I began digging in earnest, trying to find out a little bit about that area and about what was Westry's Crossroads. So as I typically do when I'm looking at something that goes back as far as some of these areas do, I went back to the early 1900s and did a search in the newspapers.com website, and I found an article, or an ad, I should say, not an article, but an ad for an auction sale. And this was in November of 1916. Lee, if you could put up item number 19 for us so our viewers can share this with us. There you go. And I realize it's kind of hard to see this. It was not a really, again, talking about a picture that's over 100 years old. But his auction sale of small farms, Wednesday, November 29th. This farm has a sandy loam soil with good clay subsoil suitable for the growth of all crops raised in the state, and is especially adapted to the culture of corn, cotton, and tobacco. This property is situated 1 1/2 miles from Westry's, North Carolina. Notice they're referring to it almost as if it were a city itself, Westry's, North Carolina. 5 miles south of Nashville and 8 miles from Rocky Mount. There are 2 good dwellings on the property in good shape and all necessary outbuildings. This property has an excellent water supply. A portion of the property is heavily timbered. Mr. Purchaser noticed the location of this valuable property right in the midst of the best farming belt in North Carolina, close to good schools, church, and stores, not over an hour's drive in horse and buggy from Wilson, Nashville, and Rocky Mount. I don't know exactly where this was. I just know it was in the Westridge community, and I'm guessing it was somewhere in fairly close proximity to the Westridge Crossroad I mentioned a moment ago. But this was in 1916, so at least as far back as 1916, that area was recognized and apparently well enough that it could be advertised as such as being the Westries community. In 1939, and we've talked about the DeLeon Parker family before and their contributions to Nash County. They were prominent citizens, very wealthy citizens in this area, in the Westridge Crossroads community area. This article appeared, item number 20, if you would, Lee, in October 1939, and it just talks about Mrs. DeLeon Parker hosted a book club meeting at their home. And if you go out Old Carriage Road and cross all the railroad tracks down there, and then go back up near the new high school, over on the right-hand side, that really pretty nice brick home there. That's the home we're talking about here. That was Mr. and Mrs. DeLeon Parker's home. By all accounts, it was a very, very nice home. These were very influential people. And I just want to read a few of these guests that attended this book club meeting at the home of Mr. and Mrs. DeLeon Carter. And I had the list here momentarily. Club members present were Mrs. P.H. Bunn, Mrs. C.C. Cockrell, Mrs. T.O. Coppage, Mrs. C.L. Benson, Mrs. J.N. Seals, Mrs. J.T. Strickland, Mrs. A.W. Futrell, Mrs. A.A. Ross, Ms. Louise Seals, Ms. Harold Cooley, that's the senator from Nashville, Harold Cooley's wife, and the list goes on and on. So very influential people. There were doctors' wives there, of course. But again, 1939, Westridge community extended out from Westridge Crossroads, of course, north, east, south, and west. In 1942, I found an ad where there was a building being sold. Item number 21, if you would, Lee. One brick store with filling station combined, one 6-room residence on Nashville Highway at Westridge Crossroads, containing about 2 acres of land. Apply to B.B. Whitaker at 735 Washington Street, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I'm not sure where this residence was. I don't remember. I mean, there was a store there on the corner, I remember. It's been a car lot, the last few businesses that I could recall being there. And that was right across the road from where Westridge Takeout used to be. So I'm not exactly sure if that's the building they're talking about, or if there was another one that's no longer in existence. I don't know. Okay, we're about to run out of time, Lee. Let's go item number 22. This is what I remember about Westridge Crossroads was Westridge Takeout. I ate there many times, had a great cheeseburger, great hot dogs, french fries. And me being a self-professed connoisseur of fine, greasy cheeseburgers, I knew where all of them were. And that was a regular stop for me anytime I was in the area. In 1975, the Nashville Graphic did a full-page spread on the Westridge community. And I'm not going to try to read all this, but I just want to share it with you. Lee, put up item number 23 if you would. And it, ironically, the headline reads, Westridge, and it asks a question, where Rocky Mount and Nashville will meet. And it seems to be the case. That area out there now is really exploding in growth. You've got, there at the crossroads, you've got the Hardee's, you've got Sheetz gas station, there's the place across the street there. Nash Community College is right down the road. They're putting those circles, what do you call them, roundabouts between Rocky Mount and Nashville. But Westridge could very well be the point where Nashville and Rocky Mount do indeed meet. In 1990, item number 24, Lee, this picture was taken of a gentleman, Mr. Dick Arnold of Hampton, Virginia, enjoying a cup of hot apple cider at the Christmas store. The store, a crafters co-op, is open only on weekends and only until Christmas. It's located on Old Carriage Road, about a half mile from Westridge Crossroads. The Christmas store, many of you may remember that. I never had the opportunity to go in that store. And before it was the Christmas store, of course, I believe Mr. Carter ran a store there. Don't quote me, I could be mistaken about that. But I do recall there had been another business there before it was referred to as a Christmas store. In 1997 was the last listing I could find, item number 25, Lee. This is the last listing I could find for anything at the Westridge Takeout restaurant. So I'm not sure it went out of business sometime after that. Item number 26, Lee. In March of 2014, there was a garage/yard sale at 637 South Old Carriage Road, which was the location of the old Christmas store. I missed this one, I'm ashamed to say. furniture, old farm equipment, pottery, lamps, recliner, books, dishes, Disney movies, inflatable boat, toys, and lots of good stuff cheap. These sold out the store at a yard sale in 2014. And item number 27, Lee, this is a picture, fairly recent picture of that area now. You're looking north there on Old Carriage Road. The old Christmas store is there on your right. If you headed on up further north past the Christmas store there, of course, you come up to Western's Crossroads. Folks, that's going to do it for us tonight. I had a few more pictures I wanted to share with you, but we didn't get to those, unfortunately. We'll save those for next week, and we'll share those on next week's show. Thank you so much for joining in to us tonight, or joining with us tonight. And thank you to those that called in and shared your memories. I really appreciate your input to the show each week. It's my pleasure to be with you. Have a great week, folks. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you next week with more Wayback Wednesday. Good night.